Hi guys, welcome back. No, you haven't gone mad. Yes, it is still the car channel, but it's a rainy day and I'm inside for a change. This little beauty came into my possession from a well-known auction site for not a lot of money, to be completely honest, and it's not in great condition, but it is absolutely spot on perfect because my dad has a big birthday coming up this year and he's lusted after this particular variety of stationary engine for probably the last 50 odd years. I never got round to actually picking one up. Came close a couple of times, but other than a Mammoth traction engine, never actually managed to get hold of one. Now, as I say, I picked this thing up and short of a few issues, it does appear to be fairly serviceable. I suppose the first of the issues is that the piston itself is loose. So one of the first jobs I'm going to need to do is source a spring to go on this, just a little external circlip to hold that in place. That's nice and easy. All of the bearings and so on seem to run rather nicely. I'll take that piston off in a sec. Other problems though are the quality of the paint. The paint is absolutely abysmal. Someone's tried to touch it up at some point. I don't know how well it comes across on the camera, but there's brush marks all around here. This is flaked off. It's really messy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to disassemble this, strip this down, sand it right back to bare metal, prime it and repaint it. That's the mission. And then I'll touch these up as well, strip it down on top with probably nitrum or something like that, and then repaint it with enamels. So that's the mission. It's also full of limescale. It also doesn't have a spirit tray, a little spirit burner. The original ones had a spirit burner and then they moved to a horrible smelling solid fuel tablet. So I should be going back to the original meths burner just to make it feasible to burn this thing inside. Other than that, I think just about everything that's required is there. The piston itself, short of actually coming off, does appear to be in a reasonably decent state. You can tell if you put your finger over the steam hole. It is only a brass piston, but that seems to be quite a nice fit. It should work admirably. I just need to find some way to restrain it, and that's usually a keeper spring on the back with a little E-clip. So there we go. So first job, I guess, is to strip it down. I'm not going to take the end off this if I absolutely don't have to. There is a cork gasket in there and they're a bit of a pain to refit. So what I'm going to do instead, I'm going to put some vinegar in there. You have to be a bit careful, but not leave it sitting in overnight. We're going to put some vinegar in there for 10 minutes or so at a time to try and deal with the limescale that's built up, and of course from that point forward only use distilled water in it, or reverse osmosis water anyway, deionized, whatever, battery top up water's the stuff. So there we go. I'm also going to have to fabricate it a little burner, as I say. The burner is missing, but that's one for another day. In the meantime, I'm going to strip this down. If anyone's interested in watching that, then it's a pretty straightforward process to do that. Bit fiddly to get this pipe out, but it'll mean that I can clean absolutely everything up, polish all the metal components, and then refinish that base back to factory fresh condition, which is that's the mission. So, clock's ticking. Birthday's at the end of the month. I won't be releasing this video, of course, until after the event. Don't want to give any clues away, but he does keep an eye on the channel. Yeah, let's get busy. Okay, so I've moved you off to the side there, just so I can strip this thing down. I'm going to go for a full strip down, keeping all of the parts, of course, safe in this little pot at the back. I'm going to use some very simple tools. Now, there is lots of little nuts and bolts holding this thing together underneath. I don't have a tiny enough spanner, so I'm going to have to just use very, very carefully the end of some pliers and a decent screwdriver. You'll notice this crown arrangement here is how the chimney fits on, so nice and easy to just pop that off, keep that safe. They are something that you can pick up online. They're not particularly difficult to get hold of on the grounds that Wilesco still make these models. Actually, they still have this range in production. Lose the fill valve straight away. There are little gaskets on these, fibre washers, sort of thing you find in plumber kits. I have plenty of those kicking around in my plumbing gear, so I'm going to replace all of these. They keep the steam in the boiler when it's going, so we just need to be a little bit careful. This is sort of the old style, this one's 60s or 70s, this is the old style of pressure valve. If you press that down, it's also a whistle, I believe, but the weight is there to make sure that a sensible amount of pressure is allowed to build up, but if there's too much pressure, then this valve here pushes up and it escapes. So that's a little regulator valve. I'll take the weight off. This thing should carefully unspin, and there is a shaped plate on the bottom that holds this arm in position. If you can see there's two flats on it to stop it spinning. That's important because it's really important that the arm itself stays directly over the top of the little pin in the middle. Okay, so that's the pressure valve. Again, little fibre washers on there. Need to replace those. There's two on this one. So what it looks like is the original one's got a bit thin, and rather than replacing it, someone's just bobbed another one on there. Okay, whatever. That's fine, so keep that safe. The piston, bring you over again. The piston just slides over on the flywheel end, just slides over, and that is as designed, because before running these, knock the chimney over, before running them you remove the piston and put a bit of oil on the piston itself to seal it, although this one is in pretty nice condition actually, even without an awful lot of grease on there. It's still quite a tight seal, so it's not been excessively used in its time. So that's the piston. Need to find a spring for that and a little external circlip. I mentioned that already. Let's see. I'm gonna have to be very careful with these. I don't have a pair of adjustable spanners rather, or small enough spanners to actually do this. So I'm going to have to be very careful not to score or mark the little nuts and bolts. Okay, so here there's a little steam deflector. So if there is any leakage or any exhaust or whatever, that pushes that downwards rather than it coming sideways and scalding you. And then there's a little threaded hollow section, kind of like a brakeline attachment, that holds that into place. Now I can't undo these two screws here because they are on the other side of this grey plate, and the grey plate itself is attached onto the back of here. Now we've taken the chimney off, we can see what's going on. So with these I am going to have to use the flat of the end of a pair of pliers very, very carefully, hold them in place and gently turn from the top with an appropriately sized screwdriver, again being very careful not to damage these, because they are still made, everything's still replaceable, but it would be a shame for it to have any new components. And of course very, very important to not lose these tiny little nuts. So I'm going to put the bolt back in there temporarily, stick it in my tray. Next one, same deal again. You can do the same with all of these actually. Hold it from the bottom and very, very gently work it loose from the top. There isn't a lot of force involved in these. Oop. That's now loose enough to hold with my fingers anyway. Okay, so that is out, and once again keep everything together. I don't know for sure that all of these components are of the same vintage, so they may have different threads, it's only comparatively recently that there's been standardisation on thread sizes, and if someone in the UK had bought this and fixed it, inverted commas, at some point, it is possible that there may be a mixture of different types, sizes, even old BSA or Imperial nuts and bolts mixed up on the model along with metric equivalents. So we'll just keep all of these nice and safe and readily identifiable. Now, as I say, this didn't cost me a lot of money, so I'm not precious about it, but it would be very, very nice to be able to restore this to its former glory. Not least because anyone can just go out and buy something like this, but if you've put a bit of effort into it, as a gift, particularly for a sizable birthday, it makes all the difference, in my humble opinion anyway. Right, so that's now loose. I have to figure out how to get this pipe out, but now I can get to the back of these ones. I can put my finger on the back of that. Oops. Put my finger on the back of the nut on the other side of this. This is going to be a pain to refit. I'm sure I'll find a way. I can remove that. Once again, keeping the nuts and bolts together. All very, very fine. Try not to lose anything. And the same with the other one. And this will allow us then to pull the steam deflecting shield off, and that should, in theory, mean that we can then wheedle this little engine piece here as well. Now, I'm not sure whether you can actually get for these the other engines that were available. There was a marine engine with double steam action, double pistons, there was all sorts of different things, but that is the receiving plate into which this little piece here goes. I might need to cut the end off this and re-flare it, but it's going to be the same flaring tool as you would use for a brakeline anyway. It's the same pipe, so that's not too scary. I'll try and wheedle that off in a minute. Now, there's probably some people screaming at the camera telling me I didn't need to do that, but I am very much finding my way as I go here. The mission is to get this disconnected so that I can repaint this base. It would be lovely to be able to get it out in one piece, but if I can't, I can't. Oh, that's fine. Alright. Next one is this one here. So let's try super gently and without scratching the boiler. I suppose really I should have put some masking tape or something onto the top of the boiler just to loosen that off. They are not particularly tight, I'm always being very careful. Okay, so that is looking better. I think if I can loosen the boiler assembly off, I might be able to rotate it 390 degrees and slide it off there. Let's see what we see. Okay, I think this has been done before. Let's see now. Path of least resistance. Are there any of these tabs that have been loosened before? Yes, there are. Right, I'm going to go for that one and that one. And this is only tin plate, so I shall be super careful with this. And beat these back afterwards with a bodywork hammer. Bend it up enough? Yes, I think so. This is looking good. It is super fine. Now, worst case scenario, I do have the gear to do very fine repairs, super fine repairs, with either silver solder or extremely fine brazing. I'm not too worried. Whatever happens, but I'm just being really careful just with using the slots in the metal base here to just prise these tabs gently back up. Assuming this hasn't been done too many times before, famous last words, they shouldn't work hard, and if they do, I shall simply tack some tabs back on and repair them that way. Okay, how are we looking from the other side? Let me just, I will just do these ones as well. I wasn't planning to do them all, but if I can, it's going to make refitting a hell of a lot easier. I'm going to have to repaint this anyway, so let's see. Let me just get the brad all. Just need to try and persuade this one to just lift up enough at the edge. So let me get some purchase in. There we go, lovely. Okay, that is all of the tabs. So, how does I look? It's pretty stuck on with glue. There we go. Definitely going to need a bit of sanding down, that's safe to say. May have to just unsolder this end. There may be no other way about it. Let's just grab a little torch and do that. Okay, so I've got a little fiberglass mat here, sort of thing you use if you are soldering plumbing joints. And even though I'm going to be painting the top, I wasn't planning on painting the bottom. So I'm going to melt this bit here if I can, and I'm going to keep it off the blue underneath and try and keep that original. We'll see what we see. that little gas torch here. Okay, so it's an end feed solder pipe. We'll clean that up, use flux on it at the other end of the journey. In the meantime, let's just be super careful here. There is the base, nearly in all its glory. I've got this tray here that could do with a good bit of cleaning up. The bottom of the boiler definitely needs cleaning up. I can remove the pipe now, which is nice. So that boiler is got quite a lot of limescale in, but a lot easier to deal with now. That needs a good old clean on the bottom. That'll come off probably with carb cleaner or brake clean or something like that. Don't need to worry too much about that. It's never going to be seen anyway, as long as the heat transfer from the fuel into the water in the boiler isn't impeded. That'll be fine. So that's rather a lovely thing. So we've got the pipe that goes from the top of the boiler down. We've got the return pipe, including the little steam deflector shield there that goes onto the piston assembly. I tell you what, I was gonna stick that piece back on at this point, but I'm not going to. I will keep that all separated, probably strip the wheel off it as well, in order to do a really nice paint job on the grey. If I strip this back to metal with something like, oh I don't know, Nitromors or something like that, this may be lead paint, but be careful at removing that. Use a workshop primer to prime it. I'll use acrylic car paint, will probably, or maybe an enamel paint, and then paint on the sort of old school Humbrol enamels on the top to bring the red back. So I should be able to do a real tidy job of that. Somebody at some point has touched up the red on the wheel. There's a bit of a splat here. We'll just move that, so I might at the same time tidy this up, give it a bit of a polish. The bearings are running nicely. That's nice. So I'll strip that down when I'm painting that, and then in the meantime, this sorry affair, which is all rusty and gummed up, and you can see it better here, has horrendous brush marks where someone's botched it in the past. And it's a toy that's been used, which again is really nice to see, but definitely going to need to do something about the fact that the paint's completely chipped off in the middle. My guess is, at some point, just looking up at the end here, my guess is that there was a plate on there at some point, and a sticker, a name plate, something like that. And I'm afraid this gunk here is what happens with those fuel tablets, as I recall from an old model years ago. So yeah, this needs taking back down to the metal. I shall use probably a flap wheel, a very fine flap wheel on an angle grinder. It sounds a lot worse than it actually is, but that'll take it straight back to the metal. Use a body shop primer once I've rust proofed it, because of course this stuff can get wet. The steam does condense and spray water all over the place. And I shall use a hammerite, smooth hammerite of almost exactly the same blue, to bring it back up and protect the metal. So that's the next job. So strip down complete. All the parts are nice and safe, although just so that there's no confusion later, I am going to spend a moment now refitting these back through their original locations, because you know it could get mixed up. This will just take a few moments, so I'll get on with this, and then we can get on with sanding the base down. This really is going to be a A very quick project. I mean, obviously I need to make sure it works functionally, but there isn't really a fat lot that can go wrong with this, as long as the boiler hasn't got a leak, and as long as it squirts steam through the motor, we should be able to get this working pretty well. So the spirit burner is one thing I'm going to have to sort out. As I say, I shall have a poke around online this evening to try and find a spring in the original retainer if I can, to get the piston mounted correctly, and we can go from there. So the next part of this will be strip down and re-priming and subsequently painting of the base plate. Nice. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next time.